Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name's David Wortley. I'm going to be the moderator for this session. We have some great people here today who are going to be telling their stories of lifestyle medicine and how they've managed to transform their lives. So what I'm going to do now is to bring all of my guests into the studio so you can see them all on the screen, and then I'm going to ask them individually to introduce themselves. So one by one, I'm bringing them onto the stage. My wonderful guests. Jen's got a camera. Oh no, she hasn't. I can see her, but I can't see her on the main screen. So I'm going to begin in the sequence that's on my screen. So Satinder, would you briefly like to give an introduction to yourself, who you are, what you do, and where you live?
Hi, I'm Satinder. I'm a GP. I live in a tiny hamlet in a small holding in County Durham, surrounded by sheep, pigs, hens, animals, lots of trees.
Okay, thank you. Jen, we can't see you, so I'm not sure what's wrong with your camera.
Oh, I don't know, because I can see me on the screen.
Well, I can see you at the bottom, but not on the main screen for some reason. But please introduce yourself.
Okay, I am Jen Wilson. I live in Springburn, which is just north of Glasgow city centre. It's a very urban area.
Okay, Vidyamala.
Hi, yes, my name's Vidyamala and I live in Herefordshire, where it's pouring with rain currently. And yeah, very, very happy to be here with you all.
Thank you. Leanne.
Hi, David. Great to be here this afternoon. I am based in just outside Glasgow, so quite an urban environment, although I spend a lot of time in the outdoors, hiking and paddleboarding and doing various other things.
Okay, and Dan.
Hi, Dan Hinesley. I'm in Burnley, Lancashire, close enough to a city, but right on the edge of the countryside.
Okay, well, we do have someone else who's joined us, Rachel Cox. So I'm going to add her to the stage. And Rachel, if you'd like to unmute yourself and just say, because you're a very important person, because you're the one who's looking after these lived experience people.
Hi, thank you, David. Yeah, I'm Rachel Cox from BSLM, the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine. And I am in Edinburgh, which is also very rainy and cold today.
Well, it seems like most of you are a little bit further north than me. I'm in the Midlands, in a little village called Alderton. So what I'm going to do now is just park you all for a moment, and I'm going to bring in Satinder to tell her story. So you will see yourself disappearing from the screen, but don't worry, you're still here. So Satinder, I'm going to disappear in a minute, and when I do, what I'd like you to do is just to talk about your experience of lifestyle medicine, how you came to lifestyle medicine, what you do, and the impact that it's had on your life. So I'm going to disappear off you.
Hi, so I'm Satinder. I'm 59 years old. When I was 20 and a second year medical student, I had a very, very severe stroke and was advised, my parents were advised I was going to die. Most of the left hemisphere of my brain has been wiped out. It was a long time ago, so probably more recently they suspect it was a carotid artery dissection, but it was massive. So I really have wiped out a lot of brain cells, and I had no function on the right side of my body, motor, sensory, speech, anything for months. So, and I was in a coma. So my prognosis was dreadful, and I certainly wasn't going to return to medicine, let alone get out of a wheelchair and return to the county athlete that I'd previously been, and the sort of the university tennis player and the avid cyclist and so forth. You know, that apparently all that was all over. And what I did was I ignored all medical advice and negative opinions about my poor kind of outcomes. And B, I went hardcore on exercise, which I already was into anyway. But I used to abscond from the ward and escape into the park, be smuggled out by medics who would piggyback me out, and then I would sort of crawl around the park in the middle of the night sneakily. I was always found out, and I was always told off and advised it would make my spasticity worse, but it probably did. And it's probably why I've got polyarthritis now. But what it did is it made me feel alive. It made me feel mentally much better. And also it worked. I found that by pushing my body beyond perceived limits, I actually ended up returning to medicine against all odds, literally all odds, because of one professor who could see how bloody minded I was. And, with very limited function on my right side of my body, I have had a very comprehensive career, and I have done a lot of minor procedures, run family planning clinics. I've done everything, injections, you name it. And on top of that, I also have a very full life. I created and landscaped the gardens, part of which you can see behind me, did it all from scratch, from seeds, and now open it for charity. I also run a charity from here and provide outdoor wellbeing therapies because I know how green exercise has benefited me. And I also do a lot of sailing, sea swimming. I've done a lot of really hardcore treks, carrying all my own gear, doing all my own home and abroad in places like Africa, New Zealand. And, for 3-4 days, literally carrying everything, staying in sort of bare slap mud huts and things, So, and I've kind of, from day one, I've just basically chucked my body around with me. And I think, as well as physical exercise, the other thing that's helped me over the years has been having a meaning and purpose. So I really decided and was determined I was going to, against all odds, return to an extremely demanding medical career, picked really hard jobs, probably picked the hardest ones because there was so much sort of prejudice against the fact I was disabled. I really wasn't wanted back at med school, and I never have been really in my medical fraternity. So I've always pushed myself, and sometimes in some ways that's been fantastic, and it's allowed me to have a full life and have great hobbies and interests and travel a lot and raise a family. I have 2 grown sons and 2 stepsons. But on the other hand, it has presented some challenges for me. So I got a needle stick injury when I was a junior doctor, which wasn't picked up for 20 plus years, and I had advanced hep C, and I was put on the liver transplant list, and I had 2 years of chemotherapy. But I carried on working through that, doing different things, but I did carry on working in a fashion which helped me actually. And I also concentrated more on sort of being outside in nature, which also helped me, and to maintaining my social connections. And that's when I also started to think about my nutrition and improve on that, and that greatly helped. So I'm now hep C free. I never had that liver transplant in the end, and all's good. And I've had other health issues, like I had an adrenal tumor, probably because I've been full of adrenaline from having to fight all these different battles over the last 39 years. But then I've had that removed, and then I had a little bit of time out of work, and then I retrained, and I'm back in general practice when a lot of GPs are leaving. I'm nearly 60. I'm not only back at work, but I'm also doing my lifestyle medicine core accreditation and then a health coaching diploma, so I can continue helping others using the pillars of lifestyle medicine that helped me to get over their difficulties in life. And I'm hoping that my personal experiences help.
Well, that's it. I mean, I was inspired by that story. I can identify with a number of things, particularly about having a meaning and purpose in life. In my situation, I'm 75 years old, but I don't ever imagine myself not working. And that is my meaning. That is what makes me a person, is I'm determined to make the most of every part of my life. Well, thank you for that, Sangeeta. I'm now going to bring in Jen. And if we can see you, Jen, well, with some reason we can't see your video. I'm not sure why that is. I can see you in the bottom, but it looks as if your video is frozen. But I will stay on the screen just so that the audience has got a picture. Perhaps you can just say a few words about your story. What brought you to lifestyle medicine?
Yeah, definitely. So I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2017 when I was 38 years old. Up until that point, I thought that I was fit and healthy. I worked in the fitness industry and I had a background in sport and exercise science. That's what my degree was in. So when I got sick, I couldn't understand why. And when I started digging into what is Crohn's disease, it's chronic inflammation, what causes chronic inflammation, and unpicking that from where's the root cause of this? And that's where I came across different elements of lifestyle medicine. I didn't know that that's what it was called at the time. And the first element that I came across was sleep and how important sleep is in helping reduce inflammation and reduce and help you recover from all your exercise. It was something when I was doing my degree was kind of brushed over. The recovery part of it, there wasn't this big emphasis on that. So when I started discovering that, and I was realising that I wasn't going to bed or going to sleep until sometimes 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I was getting up at 6 o'clock to go and teach classes, and high intensity, lots of exercise throughout the day, but my body was never being able to recover from that. So I then had to completely reevaluate everything that I was doing, prioritise sleep, reduce and reevaluate the types of exercise that I was doing for my body so that I wasn't over-exercising. And then the third pillar that was really important to me was the minimising harmful substances. I had stopped drinking about 2 years before I got diagnosed with Crohn's, so that was already out of my life, but I was very much using lots of deodorants and perfumes and body sprays and fake tans. There was lots of chemicals going onto my skin. I was on the contraceptive pill, which when I was looking into information about gut health, being on the pill is something that damages your gut health, and because Crohn's presents as an inflammatory bowel disease, there was some link between that. So it was removing things that you don't even think are harmful substances, and starting to really, you have to take a step back and look at every aspect of your life to see what it is that you're doing and where you can make small tweaks to be able to bring better health into your life. The part of the physical activity, I started going outside more. Everything I had done previously had been inside gyms, not in artificial light. So I was then exposing myself. I go paddle boarding, I like to go for walks up hills when I'm physically able to. I spend time looking out my window. I live in a very urban area, but I've got trees right outside my window. So I've set my desk up so that when I'm at my desk, I can be looking outside. I've got a house full of plants to be able to look after them. And then having a healthy relationship with myself, because you've got all these social connections, and I don't think you can have good social connections with other people until you've got a good relationship with yourself and you understand who you are, what your values are, and then that allows you to have much better, healthier relationships.
That I think is absolutely true. Well, thank you very much for that, Jen. We'll come back to you later because perhaps you give some tips on particularly on sleep. So I'm going to bring in Dan now. Dan, what's your story?
Yeah, so in my 20s, I'm now 45, but in my 20s, I had severe back pain and sciatica, and spent, well, after an MRI scan where I was shown that I had what was called degenerative disc disease and 2 black and herniated discs. I spent 15 years trying to manage that pain through traditional medicine methods, painkillers, physiotherapy, chiropractors, osteopaths, everything you could think of without having the surgery. I was told to hold off surgery as long as possible because technology was advancing all the time. So the longer I could wait, the better. But 15 years later, after having some varied success, I came across what would fit into the mental health pillar of lifestyle medicine. Some work that showed how stress and repressed emotions can cause physical reactions in the body. Really simple example is you think you've said something stupid, you feel embarrassed and your cheeks flush red. Your body is constantly reacting to thoughts and emotions. So stress and being in a state of stress response starts playing havoc with the body. And one of the things when you're stressed is if someone's about to attack you, if you think they are, or if there is a stress of an email that gives a similar response, you tense up and ready for fight or flight. And in that state for many years, it results in physical symptoms, and one of them being pain. And basically following over a 2-year period where I followed some exercises, mental health exercises such as journaling, managed to identify stressful events from childhood and the past, which when I worked through them, my pain started to disappear. Eventually it went completely, and to sign myself off, I did an half Ironman triathlon. There's people who do lots of silly things and more aggressive things than that, but for me, I wasn't able to run at all for 15 years, so for me it was a massive achievement. And now I like to volunteer for British Society for Lifestyle Medicine, and also a partner of theirs which is called Living Proof, which talks specifically around this stress and emotions element of the mental health pillar.
It's a very interesting story, and reminds me of someone that I met a few years ago on a cruise ship. One of the things I do is speak on cruise ships, and this guy, and he'd written a book about his story, but it's very similar. He didn't have any kind of physical disabilities except the fact that he was very obese. He was very obese. His aim in life was always to be a fireman, and so he managed to get a job as a firefighter after he left school. And him and his best friend were both firefighters, and their lives, in a way, went a different way. He started drinking, got overweight, and his friends seemed to have everything he didn't. His friend had a nice house, a lovely wife, and car, and he was basically boozing his life away and getting fatter until one day his boss said, "You either lose some weight or you lose your job." And he went outside and he saw a jet aircraft going over with vapor trails, and he imagined that his friend was on that plane on holiday, and it made him resolve to do something about it. And he did exactly the same as you, went on the Ironman challenge. He went on the Ironman challenge, and it was just a chance opportunity to speak to some school children about his experience of the Ironman that led him to be spotted by the head of a building society, who said, "That's a great motivating story. Will you come and talk to my management board? And by the way, we'll pay you." And his life totally transformed from that experience. So that's a good story. Thank you very much for that, Dan. I'm now going to park you, and I'm going to bring in Leanne. Leanne, what is your story?
Thanks, David. It's really fascinating. I know I've heard everyone's story before, but I always find it so inspirational to hear everybody's experience, and just how impactful it is, hopefully for others as well. My experience has been, I was diagnosed with psoriasis when I was 16 years old. So just as a kind of young teenager. I'm now 43. And I was told by my GP that it was genetic, autoimmune and incurable. So it was probably quite a hit for a 16-year-old girl to be told that, especially, I guess, just the way you feel at that age, quite vulnerable. You're kind of finding yourself. So it was quite a challenging thing to take, and it really started to kind of deteriorate and get worse and worse, like through my teenage years and into my early 20s. And sad to say, I kind of spent like an 18-year period in a kind of constant loop of short-term remission with my skin, and tried, quite honestly, every lotion, potion, miracle cure on the market. I saw everyone from kind of doctors to dermatologists to acupuncturists and aromatherapists to see if I could get some kind of long-term relief from the condition, which, you know, it is a physical condition, so it impacts your skin, but it's very much a kind of mental condition as well, because it impacts on your self-confidence and your moods. You can be very up and down, just feeling very low and things like that. So yeah, it has a really significant impact on all aspects of your life, from the things that you want to do, the things that you wear. All these things can be impacted by the condition. I tried, as I say, lots of different things. I even went to the Dead Sea out in Jordan for a matter of weeks, which was great and actually cleared my skin. But you know, on the flight home, it started to come back again, so it wasn't a long-term solution. And I did start going out to, actually, there's an inland salt lake in Spain, and I used to go out there for kind of relief, maybe once or twice a year, to kind of like clear my skin. But again, every time on the flight home, it would just start to kind of like creep back, which was yeah, obviously a bit depressing. But I started to really realize that, you know, if there are some things that make my skin worse and some things that make my skin better, there must be a reason for that. And I think that was quite a powerful realization in my kind of, in my journey to getting back to kind of full health, was I realized that I do believe in kind of cause and effect, and I think there were things that were having an impact. Also, I looked back at like my medical history right before like I was diagnosed with psoriasis and things like that, and I'd had quite a lot of I'd had tonsillitis quite a lot. I'd had quite a lot of rounds of broad spectrum antibiotics in the lead up to my diagnosis with psoriasis, so I found that really interesting. Also, just as a teenager, and especially a teenager dealing with psoriasis, I was drinking, you know, partying as a kind of teenager and into my 20s. So obviously that was having a negative impact on my skin. But it wasn't until probably about 10 years ago that I had made this decision that if something can make my skin worse and something can make it better, there's a real chance that I could kind of clear it long term. So I made some quite kind of life-altering changes to my diet and my lifestyle over a period of kind of 3 months initially, and my psoriasis cleared completely in those 3 months. And interestingly, it was this kind of time of year, so October through to December, where generally my skin would be kind of at its worst. I think just with like being indoors a lot and heating on, not getting as much sunlight, things like that. So it was quite incredible that my skin cleared completely in that time. And now I manage my psoriasis completely through diet, lifestyle intervention, but also touching on a lot of the things others have said, you know, kind of the importance of sleep, the importance of physical activity, the importance of that environment. I think that Jen talked about, you know, I live in a kind of semi-urban environment, but like you'll see behind me, like I have plants all throughout my house, and I've got like a wee bird feeder. And I just think that like natural environment, like when you can't be there, like my day-to-day job is on the computer and it is indoors. So I try and bring as much of a kind of healthy living environment into my space, which I think is vital. Yeah, so I became really passionate about diet intervention, and specifically around the gut bacteria and the gut lining and the gut wall, and things that can impact on that, whether that's specific diet things, whether it's medication, whether it's other things. I mean, interesting, Jen was also talking about substances like fragrances and other things that we put on our skin. I think there's a lot of chemicals and different things in products which people can have quite a reaction to and not even necessarily be aware of. So I'm probably far more aware of that now.
Yeah. So can I just ask you? Well, it sounds like a voyage of self-discovery.
Yes,
So did you basically teach yourself by trial and error, or was there somebody who gave you advice on these things?
So I probably got most of my advice from people with lived experience. I found them to be the real experts in this field, so I took a lot of advice and guidance from people who had had some of the most severe cases of psoriasis actually I'd ever seen, and just things that they had tried and tested. There's also quite a well-known book within like the kind of psoriasis community, Pagano, Healing Psoriasis Naturally. And there's a lot of really good advice in there. And that was probably like a starting point for me and many others actually. And it was at a time where, we knew nothing about the gut. We knew nothing about gut bacteria or the impact of these kind of things. So, but it's a really interesting book and I probably took a lot from that. So.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm now going to just park you for a moment, and then I'm going to Vidyamala. Tell us your story. I've watched your video, and I've been very inspired by that. But now's your chance to tell everyone.
Thank you so much, David, and wonderful to be here with you all. So I was very fit as a child and a teenager, and then I injured my spine when I was 16 and went on to have 2 major surgeries. I had a fusion that went wrong, so then I had a really extensive sort of repair operation. So I was left with chronic pain then when I was 17. Then when I was 23, I was in a car accident and fractured another part of my spine. So I now live with what's called incomplete paraplegia. So I use a wheelchair or crutches for mobility, and I've got paralyzed bowel and bladder. I'm now nearly 65, so it's nearly 50 years that I've had this condition. So initially I just pretended it hadn't happened, and I really pushed against it. So I went into what I call denial, which is a kind of pushing, willful sort of approach that ultimately didn't really serve me very well, because I had a big crash when I was 25. Like my body just couldn't take that kind of pushing. And so in a way, I would say the subsequent years have been a journey towards a deeper acceptance that this is how it is. This is how my body is. And how can I live in this body with as much sort of grace, if you like, dignity, acceptance. And, I have a good life. I have a very rich life, and I'm still living in this body and trying to care for this body, I guess. I founded a charity called the Breathworks Foundation back in 2000, and we teach mindfulness for people with pain and disability, as well as general stress of life. And this is very much drawn on my own experience. So in terms of the pillars, I see that the mindfulness, the mental health side of it is the foundation, because in a way it's very difficult to engage with the other pillars if you haven't got awareness, you're not aware of the sort of choices you're making. But that my quality of life now is very much informed by what I call applied mindfulness or holistic mindfulness, which is applying mindfulness to what I eat, how I exercise, my contact with nature, my relationships, my friendships, and my sleep habits. I think one of the things that I really have learned, and I'd like to say today, is I think what can happen when we have a health challenge and then when applying these lifestyle things is we can get very obsessive. I'm not hearing that from anyone else on the panel today, but certainly that's been my experience and people I've taught. This kind of, try to do the pillars perfectly and maybe get very obsessive about food, very obsessive about exercise and so on. But obsession in itself is also another problem. I think that when we get obsessive, we're not really working with our situation gracefully. So one of the things I like to say to people is you won't do anything perfectly, but if you do everything adequately, that can lead to quite substantial changes over time. So if I look at my own journey, where I feel I have, really profoundly changed how I relate to my difficulties, is I've had this broad front of micro changes, nutrition, movement, sleep, and so on. And if you work across a broad front for a long time, you can bring about really lasting change. But I kind of really love this message. You won't do anything perfectly, but do everything adequately. That's enough. That's enough, because we're all complex humans, aren't we? And the striving for perfection is just a real rod for our backs as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can as well identify with that. Although I have to say that when I first started out, it was basically the 10,000 steps mantra, and I've walked at least 5 miles every day for the last 11 years. And missed very, very few days. Normally, if I've got a long haul flight and I walk up and down Heathrow trying to make my steps, even walk up down the cabin of the aircraft to get the number of steps in. So you could say that was a bit obsessive. But for me, I also had to learn that with diet particularly, you can, or even harmful substance, if you like alcohol. It's not that I'm an alcoholic, but I do, if I have a glass of wine, then I have to have 2 or 3. I drink wine as if it is water or pop. So wine is not really an attraction to me at all, or alcohol is not really an attraction. But in a social circumstance, if someone else is having a glass of wine, you want to be sociable, you have a glass of wine. Unfortunately, in your own personality that it is not. With the wearable devices I use, I see a direct connection between that and my blood rate, my heart rate goes up. My resting heart rate goes up by a couple of points, even if I just have 1 glass of wine. So, but I don't beat myself up, and that's the key point to it, is that you everything in moderation, as you say. Oh, thank you, Video Marla. I'm going to now bring in Rachel. Rachel, could you say, you're muted at the moment, but could you say a few words about the Voices of Lived Experience at BSLM, a little bit about lifestyle medicine and your own story?
Yeah, sure. Apologies, I'm full of cold, so I sound a bit blocked up. So at BSLM, we're really trying to bring together this group of lived experience with all of our lovely members who you've just heard from earlier, because we think it's really important that these stories are shared with our members and with kind of the wider reach that lifestyle medicine has. At the moment, we're very good at providing information and education and resources around lifestyle medicine, but what we really need to know and see is how real people have used it and how it's really impacted their lives. And I think that's the real power of everyone's stories that they've shared with us earlier. So that's kind of where we're going with BSLM. And also because we'd like to be able to produce things for people who are maybe in a similar situation to everyone we've heard from earlier when they first came to their illness or problem, where to go for information and resources, how to get started with the 6 pillars and how to use lifestyle medicine. So with their help, we'd love to create some resources to help people and inspire them in those situations. For me, my story, I previously worked for a charity, kind of a statutory health body that used people's experiences of the NHS to help inform service improvement. So that's kind of the perspective I'm bringing to BSLM. And also I'm a social anthropology graduate as well. So kind of always that person-centered kind of perspective is how I've kind of learned, how I've kind of studied really while I was at university. Yeah, thanks, David.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Rachel. Now, I'm going to bring everybody back onto the screen again now, and we'll have a little bit of discussion about some of the things that you found easy as far as lifestyle medicine is concerned, and some of the things that you found more difficult. So I'm going to add you all back to the stage now. Okay, so I can see you all there, apart from Jen, whose camera's still not working. And what I'd like to start with, because I'm involved in many different things, but one of my roles is as the founding director of the Health and Wellbeing Technology Centre at IOMA Global Futures, and so recently, in fact, this week, they published one of my newsletters about lifestyle medicine and the benefits of the boardroom and for corporate health. So I want to begin by asking each of you to if you've got any tips for executives of companies that they can. What difference is lifestyle medicine likely to make to employees within different organizations? So I'm just going to go around and ask all if you've got any tips or advice for the corporate sector on how to improve. How do we start improving the health and well-being of staff? So, Rachel, can I start with you? I'm just going to go around as I see you on the screen.
Yeah, sure. So, well, I would say from my experience working with BSLM, we definitely do practice what we preach, and we're given a lot of flexibility and trust with how we work and when we work. And I think for everyone in the team, that's really beneficial for our health, because it means we can fit in the things we want to do when we want to do them. And I think it reduces some of that stress as well, which obviously we know has a big impact on everything to do with your health. So yeah, I think just giving employees trust and kind of trying to reduce micromanaging would definitely be something that I think has been really helpful and something really positive I've noticed since working for BSLM.
And Satinder, have you got any advice for corporates? You know, anything that senior executives can do in terms of facilities that they give staff or training that they can give staff?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually got experience working. I was a clinical commissioning chair for a number of years, and so I worked within the wider NHS, and I really saw, and I've always been really close to staff and saw the impact that poor working conditions, constant sort of job changes, short notice had on their well-being, but also to the productivity of the organisations, first and foremost. I saw that within general practice as that's changed over the decades. I've been within general practice for over 35 years. So, and the thing that I would say that would be really helpful is firstly, to get rid of the top-down approach, to have much more of a team approach, and to realise and to get to know the added value of each player in your team, not to just tell people what to do, but to actually think about what skills they've brought in and to make them feel like they are the master of any changes. So giving them a sense that they belong, that they have a purpose in that organisation. Certainly, I think to provide adequate breaks so they can actually get outside, so they can actually move their bodies, and to encourage people to walk to each other and not to communicate through their stations, remotely, but to actually rebuild that sort of social connection, but also physical movement throughout the day, and to ensure that there's access to good quality nutrition and hydration during the day as well is really, really important. It's very difficult to talk about working hours because, there's this thing about GDP and productivity and less people doing more work. But of course, that isn't helping because it just results in I see it with my patients, lots of people, many more people on long-term sick, which they never used to be. And it's always because they are burnt out by their jobs. And it's not helping any of these organizations at all. So, I mean, that needs to change. Even though they think it's saving the money in the short term, long term, it's costing them big time.
Leanne, have you got any thoughts? I mean, what about wearables? Do you use wearable devices at all to monitor your health?
Yes, I do. In fact, I just got a new one.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, I do use wearables, and I do find them really helpful just for kind of monitoring, kind of day to day. I think it's an interesting one because I think Satinda covered that really well in terms of like what we really need in that corporate working environment. I think one of the biggest challenges that kind of hasn't been solved as yet is just the amount of time spent sitting and the amount of time on computers nowadays. And I know just in my kind of working day, you know, you have like back-to-back online meetings and, you know, you're on the computer probably quite a significant amount of time now compared to maybe even like 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. And I do think that doesn't create the kind of healthiest working environment to spend so long kind of sitting. So I think anything that companies can do to kind of change and transform that environment, it is tricky because I think obviously you're trying to get things done, you're trying to work through your actions and this, that, and the next thing. But I mean, walking meetings and things like that, we do try and implement them at our work. Whenever possible, or like even just getting up and walking and having a phone call rather than having like an online meeting, or sending more emails, are some options. Also, I mean, I know a lot of people have started getting kind of for home working things like treadmills, which can be quite tricky, or standing desks, another great option, or even like you can get small cycling machines for under the desk. But I think probably one of the biggest challenges is that for a lot of office workers, or office athletes as my friend calls them, you're seated and on a computer. So.
Well, I understand, I think it was Microsoft, people have experimented with walking meetings. Mm-hmm. So instead of having a meeting in a room, you go for a walk and you discuss the problems of the day whilst you're walking. Dan, what about you? Have you got any tips?
Yeah, so I spent 25 years in the technology industry, mainly working for large global technology consultancies, bidding for projects and that sort of things. And then one of the biggest things that I found was that I used to always be so productivity and efficiency focused. And I thought that was just driving myself hard. And I realized that actually sitting and doing nothing is the biggest productivity hack there is. So when I started becoming more familiar with meditation through my own recovery journey, and building mindfulness breaks into the day, I just found I was way more efficient. I got stuff done that made an impact. I achieved more by doing less. So the biggest productivity hack there is, in my opinion, is to chill out a little bit. Stop being so obsessed with pushing.
Yeah, I mean, there are some tools and technologies today. I mean, one of my interests is virtual reality. And I know some organizations have put in what you might call virtual reality projectors so that people can sit in a room with pleasant mountain scenery or the environments as a way of chilling out. So that's a possibility. Jen, have you got any thoughts on this? Are you there, Jen?
Yeah, well, I've not worked in the corporate industry for more than... Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay,
hear you. Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't worked in the corporate for... Okay. Not worked in corporate for more than 15, 16 years, so unfamiliar with what the culture's like now. But the first thing that came to mind when you said about corporate was how do people get more rest in, which everybody else has already kind of touched on and covered, but also not encouraging that culture who can be in earliest and going home the latest. There was definitely a lot of celebration around that when I worked in the corporate industry.
Okay, thank you, Vidyamala. You've got a, shall I say, a disability. I don't like to use that word, but being in a wheelchair, you have some issues or difficulties. Is there anything you can suggest for the corporate sector?
Well, I suppose it depends on, how big the company is. Smaller companies, the sort of thing Rachel was talking about, a lot of trust. At Breathworks, where we're a pretty small team, about 12 people, we've got like a chat thing, which is really good. So people can say, I'm feeling a bit rough today, or, I'm going to take the morning off and make up my hours on Thursday, whatever. So there's a lot of goodwill and a lot of support. Bigger organizations, of course, that's much harder to do. I think probably what I would always say to anybody is go for the low-hanging fruit, first of all, because you might do that. If it's a big company and you're talking about, culture change, and you make the changes too big, then no one will do them, least of all the managers, because they'll be worried about all the things that we've been talking about, productivity and so on. So I think the low-hanging fruit is things like sorry, I'm just on a call, Sammy. Sorry, someone's just come in. Getting people to stand up at their desks, and using a timer, maybe standing up for 10 minutes of the hour. Obviously, that's more difficult for me, but I can do that with my crutches, and actually having a stretch is really good. Moving once an hour, even if it's just moving for sort of, a few minutes. Having hydration stations in the office so people can fill their water bottles easily. What we do in our organisation at Breathworks is we start meetings with a little pause. That's so good. Even just like 3 minutes, we could just sit there quietly. So you're not just going straight into the next thing, a mindful break. That's not that difficult a thing to introduce into an organisation. Getting off Zoom and doing phone calls, that's very good, because we all get zoomed out. It's so weird, this business of sitting, looking at a screen. So what I do with my chief exec is, we'll have a phone call and I'll lie on my bed while I'm talking to him. So I think that's very good. He goes outside, he'll do the phone calls outside, and I'll do the phone calls lying on my bed. And that's great. That's way better than us both being glued to a screen. So things like that, walking meetings and so on. So I think, always look for the low-hanging fruit, because small changes, as I said before, small changes done by enough people can bring about culture change, probably more successfully than management trying to impose something that, is too big for people to get their heads around.
Yes, I would agree with you there. What I want to do now is to try and get some top tips from you, things that you've learned. If you were to suggest one thing that people can change in their lives related to lifestyle medicine, what would it be? I'm going to start, because I can give loads of different examples in my own life, but one thing that I found, certainly with hydration, is to cultivate good habits. So I have a pint glass on the kitchen surface, and when I come in, if it's for my breakfast or for a tea break, I fill that glass and I drink it. So there are 6 times in the day, 5 or 6 times in the day, where I come into the house to eat something, and having that glass on the kitchen surface reminds me, and it turns into a regular habit of making sure that I'm fully hydrated. So, Rachel, have you got any tips related to any of the 6 pillars?
I suppose something I was told by a dietitian, and again, it's very specific to every person and where you're at and how you want to change your lifestyle. I think it needs to be personalized for everyone. But for me, what's helped is, in terms of eating variety of fruits and vegetables, I was finding it difficult, overwhelming to think about eating that variety kind of every day or every few days, when in reality, if you just change up the vegetables, the 2 vegetables, say, and the 1 fruit that you buy each week, change that up every week, then that's a great way to add variety rather than feeling like you need to eat all of these different things every single day.
So that may be for your gut health, presumably. Yeah.
Yeah, for gut health and just for general variety, I think. I'm no expert in diet, but
no, nor me. Satinder, what one tip would you give to people?
Mine would be to not focus on the detail of whatever conditions you've been diagnosed with, particularly all those really negative lists that they give around what all the things you can expect to happen to you and what your symptoms, horrible symptoms you're going to suffer from and all that malarkey. Not to do that, but to reach into yourself, rediscover your own self-awareness, and, you know, dare I say, you know, be the master of your own destiny, and then do the hard work around whichever pillars you feel you need to focus on, and all of them will be helpful. And really focus on that, particularly the ones that you tend to put to one side. So for me, I know it's mindfulness. I know that's the thing that will probably help me more than anything else, but that I'm really struggling. I'm nearly 60 and I might have to talk to you other guys about that at some point, but I am inspired by listening to the people and seeing how it's helped them.
So how would you describe mindfulness, and what is it? Because I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine just a couple of weeks ago, and she highlighted mindfulness as the one thing that's really helped with her. And she said it's not about meditation, it's about being in the moment. So you put all of those extraneous thoughts that keep coming into your head, and if you're having a conversation with somebody, you just focus on that. So whatever it is to be in the moment. Would you kind of go along with that?
I would agree to a point, and I do that a lot with my being outside in nature. That is my mindfulness, because I am in the moment. The problem is that I struggle with the being still stuff. And I do think that, yes, you can be in the flow with an experience, you know, with a hobby, interest, being in nature or whatever. But I think that, you know, for people, particularly with disabilities, your body does need sometimes to be quiet. And it also allows you to really acknowledge any deep pain that is stuck, you know, because you often just spend your days just struggling with basic stuff that others take for granted. And I think to be still and quiet is a real skill, because that's when you really develop your deep self-awareness, which have been talked about by several of the other fantastic speakers here. And they've testimony to how their lives have changed by really embracing that side of it.
Thank you. Leanne, what about you? What would be your top tip?
Yeah.
What one thing would you get people to have a look at?
I mean, probably just to follow on from the mindfulness. I mean, I think in our society today, we're completely overstimulated with, we're kind of bombarded almost with like messages, images, information on our phones. So I think even if you're not setting yourself aside for like a deep meditation, and maybe for some that's quite challenging, I think even just turning everything off and being in a quiet room or a dark room, like something even as simple as that, I think can actually be quite powerful, especially if you are an office worker or you are working on computer screens and things all day. Actually just turning everything off and having dedicated time and space away from everything, even if it's not a deep meditation or something, I think could have a profound impact on people. But my one thing would probably be diet, just because of the impact that it's had on my life. And even just, I think someone said it earlier, but not always striving for perfection, but even that kind of 80-20 rule, and making healthy foods available and visible, I think is something that I think works really well, is just having food, snacks, things that are you can see that are kind of ready to eat. I think helps a lot with yeah, having a better diet.
I agree with that. I can identify with that because I don't know whether you know Zoe, but I did try the Zoe diet, and
Oh
it
yeah,
didn't make a difference.
I know.
Yeah, it did make a difference. Although I don't like the company at all. I don't like some of the tactics that they use, but that's a totally different story. But what helped with me again is having a bowl of fruit, different fruits, in always on the table, and I got a little plastic container full of nuts that I can snack on. So it's having those things that I know are going to give me variety, and having those lying around and being accessible and visible, that's going to make a world of difference.
Yeah,
And
and knowing, sorry, I was just going to say,
carry on.
knowing
Yeah.
the triggers as well, like you kind of mentioned about going into the petrol station, and I think having an awareness of some of these triggers, it's not to say you can never have a chocolate bar, but knowing that that's a trigger for you, you can almost like plan in advance and like go after you've had a meal, or go when you're not as hungry, or have a bit of a plan of what you're going to do.
Yeah, I was very heartened by the late Dr. Michael Mosley, the video that they played at the conference, where he said on one of the recordings of a TV program, he said, I can't have a bar of chocolate in the house because if I find it, I will eat it. And I can really identify with that. Dan, what would be the one tip that you would give?
I would encourage everyone to do one simple exercise, which is to take an A4 piece of paper and draw a line across the middle representing your timeline from birth to now. And above, write all the stressful events in life that have happened: moving house, changing schools, divorce of parents, death of people. And then along the bottom, any illnesses that you've experienced through your life. And just out of interest, see if there's any correlation between stressful events in life and illnesses. And if there are, then start putting some steps in place to reduce stress.
Good point. Jen, what about you? Are you there, Jen?
Yeah, I'm here, yes. I would say to do a full audit on what you do every single day, from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep, because so many people are just on autopilot that they don't even know what foods they've eaten, whether or not they've drank enough fluids, whether or not they've done any exercise, or been stuck on a screen for the whole day. So until you have awareness of what you are consuming, and not just food and drink, but in the environment and your visuals, what you're putting into your mind, once you know that, then you can start to look at what things really work for you, what things don't work for you, and then you can start to make the change.
Yeah, I again, that's another excellent point, and being grateful for what you have rather than beating yourself at things you haven't got. Video Marla, last but not least, what would you say as a tip? You're muted.
Sorry. The one thing I would say is to love routine. And I think that will map onto all the pillars. Go to bed at roughly the same time every day, get up at roughly the same time every day, have your meals at roughly the same time every day. Certainly I do that, and it's been really helpful. I do Qigong every morning. I go outside and do it. It's really wonderful. I do some stretches later in the day. But again, not to be obsessive. So to have routine as the kind of map of your life. And then obviously sometimes you'll go outside that routine. But I think it can really support lifestyle medicine. It means you're not kind of reinventing the wheel every day, but you've just got this basic structure as much as you can manage within your circumstances that you can just sort of relax into. I think that's important, that we can relax into routine and not see routine as a boring thing, but see routine as a supportive thing.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely, and I find the trouble is I love travel, and I find that one of the most disruptive things for routine. Because if I go to a foreign country, I'm eating different foods. I don't know what the nutritional value is, and it totally disrupts what would be my normal daily routine here in the UK. Well, all I can say is we're coming about the last 30 seconds of this get together, and I just want to thank you all for giving your time and your expertise and your experience. And I hope that those who have watched this live event and also afterwards the recording will get as much value from it as I have. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.